All right, good morning. It's Wednesday, July 30th, 2025. Welcome to looks to be a smoky morning out there on Lake Wissota. Looks like we're going to have a air quality alert situation again coming into play. Let me get myself all situated here. It's all about placement and posture, and the lights up there that I still haven't fixed, but we'll get to that. Coming up on the program today is a big anniversary. Medicaid and Medicare were signed into law 60 years ago today. Happy 60th, Medicare and Medicaid. We're coming to kill you, is the message from the Trump administration on this milestone day. We'll also have guests from the Chippewa Falls School District in our homeroom segment for this week. We're going to talk about declining enrollment and how, whether it's because of demographics or taxpayer-funded private school vouchers, each time a kid leaves a public school, so does a little bit of state aid. But the expenses don't change. The lights still go on, whether that classroom has 30 kids in it or 25. The school bus still needs to get gassed up. So we'll ask if this current system is sustainable with our Chippewa Falls School District guests today. And then we've got this weird little crossover thing going with our guests in our 8 o'clock hour for our climate check. Usually it's just Melissa Baldoff. But our guest is one of our Friday guests, former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel. And we'll be talking about all of the ways that climate is in the courts. There's some big lawsuits out there in New York, in Hawaii, in Italy, in the world court that could finally change the way that we take care of climate in ways that our White House and Congress do not want to do. So that and so much more still ahead, starting at 6:06 across the Civic Media Radio Network and right here. We'll see you soon.
Live across Wisconsin on Civic Media, you're listening to Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, powered by Up North News. Now, from our Lake Wissota studio, here is the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Kreitlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It is 6:06 on this Wednesday morning, July 30th, 2025. It's another beautiful, although a bit smoky morning to have you here up north. Live from Lake Wissota, from wherever you're spending your mornings, listening across the Civic Media Radio Network, or catching us on Facebook or YouTube, or as a podcast on Spotify or Apple, maybe through the Civic Media app. We appreciate you getting the middle of your week going right here. I've got a question for you. If the Brewers win this afternoon and sweep the Cubs, is it fair to now call this a time of unbridled enthusiasm? Or are we all going to be so cynical as to go, well, it's just a matter of time, before the collapse? I choose to go with the former, and producer Parker Olson, I think, by the gleeful look on his face, agrees with me because of the way the game ended last night. He's just itching. You're itching to push that button there, aren't you?
I'm itching to push that button.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
itching to say that we beat the Cubs again.
Okay. Well, I kind of gave that away. We beat the Cubs, but it was such an exciting way to do it. Yes, we're starting right with this sports note because it is very exciting. These kids don't even know where these kids came from. I did not know their names at the start of the season. Andrew Vaughn. Did you know Andrew Vaughn at the start of the season?
I knew the name. He wasn't on my radar, though.
You might have been thinking about Greg Vaughn, or you might have been thinking about who's who's the one from Major League, the Charlie Sheen character. Maybe that Vaughn. But no, Andrew Vaughn was called up from the minors on July 7th. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, he has driven in 21 runs. The only hitter with more RBIs is the Philly superstar Kyle Schwarber. Last night, Vaughn had 6 RBIs, including 4 with 1 swing of the bat as the bases were loaded last night.
Here's now Vaughn and a drive. Left center and deep. Vaughn! Who wrote this script?
I don't know, but I'm loving it. Let us just enjoy the ride. Last night, the Brewers beat the Cubs 9-3, including that grand slam from Andrew Vaughn. The Brewers have the best record in baseball, 20 games above 500, 63-43. They've won 15 of their last 18 games, including that 11-game winning streak, and they now have a 2-game lead over the Cubs in the National League Central Division. And look at Parker's the smile is just plastered right on there,
I'm just so happy, It's good. Good baseball is so fun.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me so happy. It also put a big smile on my face last night when Colin Ray on the mound for the Cubs did his best Justin Fields impression, if you want to go with Justin Fields, because people were saying, hey, or Caleb Williams, sorry, I'm a couple of years off. People were saying yesterday or the day before about how Miz was doing a Jordan Love impression when he air milled that throw to first.
Oh, see, and that's the thing. Chicago fans always get over their skis on this stuff.
I know.
Thank you, Luke, for the reminder. Ricky Vaughn is what I was looking for. So can we call Andrew Wild Thing now in honor of the movie reference?
I've been calling him King Vaughn. You can call him whatever you want. He's good.
I'm just saying, Wild Thing with a bat. And he's been just incredible. All right, the news is not all good, and then we'll wrap things up with the Brewers here. Jackson Churio hit a leadoff triple in the 5th inning, but he was running so hard to third, he ended up with a right hamstring spasm, so let's hope that's not something serious. However, Brewers pitcher Quinn Priester, again, when the season started, if you'd have told me Quinn Priester would be one of the big starting pitchers, I'd have said, huh?
That's a big who. Yeah.
He now has 10 wins on the season against only 2 losses. He worked into the 6th inning, allowed 8 hits, but only 2 runs. So the Brewers go for the sweep in Game 3 this afternoon. Freddie Peralta starting for the Brewers. And then they're off tomorrow, heading to Washington, D.C. for a weekend series with the Nationals. Then early next week in Atlanta. And then they're back home next week for the weekend against the New York Mets. But you can see the Brewers go for that sweep against the Cubs starting this afternoon. Coverage begins at 12:35. on several of these civic media radio stations. So, Parker, that's the reason for the unbridled enthusiasm. Other than that, how are you otherwise? I mean, is there anything else? Does it matter at this point?
I don't think it does matter. I will say it is a little weird here in Madison right now. John and Gordy and their producer Dominic were at the Brewery game last night.
Oh, yes, they brought fans to the Brewers game. Yes.
Yes, they met up with some fans. And now they predicted how tired they would be today. So
not a fresh show not a live show today in Madison.
Not a live show. I believe an hour of it is new.
Okay. But what does that mean down there at the radio station at the top of State Street near the Capitol?
That means that Parker is by himself
in a large, dark radio area. You can start to hear things.
I know. It's a little freaky above Comedy on State.
Well, especially when I read what's on the show today and how I start things. I started with murder. So yeah, so take a look around.
This will be a fun show.
Take a look around the radio station and be wary. Today is a big birthday for Medicare and for Medicaid. It turns 60 years old. And so the episode title for this hour is Happy 60th. We're here to kill you. Because a birthday like this should be a cause for celebration for the untold number of lives made better through healthcare security for the retired, the disabled, and other at-risk populations. Instead, all those recipients are being called lazy, told to get off the couch, being lumped in with a minuscule number of cheats as an excuse for conservatives to reach their long-sought goal of removing the safety net and letting Americans return to an era of old age poverty and bankruptcy resulting from getting sick. So, happy birthday, Medicaid, Medicare. We'll talk more about that coming up later this hour. We'll also have a couple of guests from the Chippewa Falls School District, the business manager and a school board member, about the problems being faced with declining enrollment in many school districts around Wisconsin. Because look, whether it's demographics or increasingly the threat from taxpayer-funded private school vouchers, it's starting to peel kids away from our state's public schools. And each kid who leaves means general state aid goes down a little bit, but expenses don't. The lights still have to go on. The school bus still has to get fueled up, whether there are 20 kids or 19 kids. So we will talk in our homeroom segment about whether the current system is sustainable. Our climate check has a weird little crossover thing going. We normally talk to Melissa Baldoff on Wednesdays about climate issues. We talked to former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel on Friday about legal issues. But Jim Santel comes over and visits us for climate check because so much of our climate discussion now is happening in the courts rather than in Congress. We ask is big oil about to go the way of big tobacco and face an overdue courtroom reckoning for its role in putting our climate and all of human health in danger? If that is the case, there's no shortage of courtrooms where that might happen. We will talk with Jim Santel and Melissa Baldoff about a world court ruling, as well as landmark lawsuits that are making progress this week in Hawaii and New York and Italy, among other places. We'll check in with civic media reporter James Kelly with an update on stories across Northwest Wisconsin. Jimmy Kuska covers Southwest Wisconsin. Earl Ingram checks in from Southeast Wisconsin. We'll have Brittany Merlot's forecast as well. Just so much ahead coming up today, including Brittany's forecast for the state, which I'll tell you, it's like I said, it's smoky. There's going to be wildfire smoke spilling into the state once again today and tomorrow morning. The stretch of dry weather, Brittany says, is just about here. We've got one more slight chance of rain and showers to the south. She says it'll be partly sunny north, cloudy in the south, rain and some storms expected by midday, heavy rain possible into this evening, again, mostly south. Highs today in the upper 70s up north, low 70s in the south, and east wind today at 10 to 15 miles an hour. Rain gradually ending tonight, decreasing clouds. Lows tonight in the upper 40s up north, mid-50s south, and a northeast wind at 5 to 10. And then, a dry stretch of weather is on the way. And that's just going to feel so good to have. Well, I'm couching simply because of the wildfire smoke, and it's never been a fun thing, but it is what it is. We can't put out Canada just like blowing out a match. So please be aware that if you have breathing issues, if you know of people who are elderly and maybe shouldn't be outside, maybe urge them to take a break from mowing the lawn that particular day. The grass will still be there tomorrow when the air quality settles down. Looking at news stories that we want to follow today, and I just want to make comment on one here about Congressman Tom Tiffany. And I didn't know if I wanted to believe that this was true. I didn't want to jump on it. I didn't want to speak prematurely. When a couple of weeks back, some folks in the Wausau area who were demonstrating at Tom Tiffany's regional office said that, the sprinklers had been turned on them again. And I said, wait, I'm sorry, again? And they said, yeah, it seems like now whenever they go to, hold up signs and let people know that Congressman Tiffany is, cutting Medicaid, is cutting their benefits, is making life harder overall up north. It seems like coincidentally, at that particular office building, the sprinkler system goes on. So there was a post, was it yesterday or the day before, that they were ready this time. They appeared to be dressed in street clothes or something, and when the sprinklers came on, they shed their upper layer and instead had like rain slickers. They pulled out umbrellas, and they had signs about, who is it really that's all wet? Tom Tiffany trying to rain on their parade. Now, that's funny. Don't get me wrong. I think it's unfortunate that they had to go through this experience to be prepared for what they faced most recently. But let's not skip the larger issue here. And that is that a member of Congress and or their staff are okay with the idea of, when faced with people who are opposed to what they're doing and calling attention to it, would turn the sprinklers on intentionally. Who does that? And by the way, if you're laughing at that, if you're going, that's funny, no, it's not. And it wouldn't be funny if it worked the other way either. If you told me that Mark Pocan's office or Gwen Moore's office turned the sprinklers on the Americans for Prosperity people coming to demonstrate outside their office, I'd be like, no, we don't do that. That's a jerk move. Or, some other words I can't use on the radio. And in this era of entertainment where everything's got to have like a heel turn or a twist or whatever the case may be, it just seems that some old fuddy-duddy, and in this case it's going to be me, is going to say, whatever our disagreements, we can be better than that. We don't have to engage in that kind of, again, I'll just use the safe word, jerk-like behavior. If we can't disagree civilly without trying to either hurt others or drench them, as the case may be, then really how far have we fallen? Let's just keep that in mind. From the heart of America's up north, live from Lake Wissota, thank you for making this the place to spend part of your mornings. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
Welcome back to Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, where we wonder when he'll unmute.
All this is going to do is make the case for me to get an even bigger monitor. And I've got like one of the biggest iMac monitors out there. Yeah. And yet I still have one window in front of the other window, or too many tabs are open. And if I cover up that one enough and I can't see if my mute button's on or not, I'm going to miss it. So it occurs to me, as Sherry drives into work and she's going, oh, he's going to say it, isn't he? You know, if we could put like a 72-inch monitor up on the wall, right in front of me on the desk here. Yeah. I mean, that'd be like we'd have a control center. I could launch rockets from this place.
I was going to say, that seems a little
extreme.
Big time.
Yeah. But you know, if I can claim it as a write-off, you're saying there's a chance?
I'm sure that'll get approved.
I'm sure that will not. So maybe I'll just pay attention better to the windows. As I was saying before I rudely interrupted myself with silence, you can sign up for our daily newsletters. Head over to upnorthnewswi.com and click on subscribe in the top banner. The newsletter this morning talks about the new wave of cooperation playing out between Trump's ICE and Wisconsin sheriffs, which could have some consequences for Wisconsin communities and local budgets and, frankly, public trust in local law enforcement. Also, an article on how to spend the best possible weekend in Lake Geneva. That and more as part of our daily newsletter. Sign up for it at upnorthnewswi.com. All right, maybe you've heard about this it was in yesterday's Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, but I wanted to pass it along because, well, it's just not a surprise. Last hour we were talking about bad behavior by Republicans, and we've got another story about it as well. Though first I should mention on the text line here, Mark in Prairie du Sac says, who does that? Talking about turning the sprinklers on when somebody's demonstrating in front of your office. It challenges one to be civil in the face of such incivility. And Mark also notes that it's raining this morning in Prairie du Sac, so thank you. Appreciate the update on that. By the way, you can join us in the comment sections over in Facebook and YouTube. Now, we're on the Up North News Facebook and YouTube pages and the Civic Media Facebook and YouTube pages. Put a comment there. Make it a nice one. Otherwise, I got the delete button right here. It's very easy to do. So, again, avoid the jerk-like behavior. Jim in Brookfield on the text line using the Civic Media app. The person who speaks of civility, common sense, and the ability to disagree is not the old fuddy-duddy, but is the adult in the room. Thank you, Jim. Although I have to, here's why I laugh at that. When I was running for legislature back in 2006, and I was talking about the dysfunction in the legislature, and I made the line that, we need more grown-ups in the room. Well, ever since that time, there had been a talk radio station in the Eau Claire area for many years. And one of the co-hosts, who I can now say, who's not there anymore, but loved to engage in, again, here's that safe word, jerk-like behavior. And loved to, mock my saying, that we needed adults in the room whenever he disagreed with me and said, well, I thought he was going to be the adult in the room, meaning apparently I was only supposed to agree with him. So whenever I hear about the adult in the room, it makes me laugh because I'm still here doing my thing. And he is not. Eau Claire's been without a local news talk station for several years now until we came along. You're welcome. So getting back to the jerk-like behavior from other politicians from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel yesterday, comes this. State Assembly Representative Bob Donovan was paying himself $850 a month from his campaign until he got caught. This from investigative reporter Dan Bice at the Journal-Sentinel. And this is not a big surprise to people in southeast Wisconsin because Bob Donovan, sure, he's a state representative in the city of Greenfield, but he had been a candidate for mayor in Milwaukee. He was a longtime alderman on the Milwaukee City Council. And yet when he was running for the assembly against Democratic candidate Lou Ann Bird, he claimed he was living in Greenfield, but he had homes in both Milwaukee and Greenfield. After legislative boundary lines were redrawn last year when they got rid of the gerrymandered maps, Donovan said he would run in the newly formed 61st Assembly District. But Donovan's Greenfield residence was outside the new district, so he got an apartment in the new district while keeping the old place. Now, again, technically, there's nothing wrong with that. But after defeating Luann Byrd again this past November, he voted using the address of his new in-district apartment, Bice writes, while his wife used the old out-of-district residence to vote. And then a month after the victory, Donovan began paying himself $850 a month from his campaign account for, quote, staff lodging at his old house. In all, he paid himself just about $6,000 in the 7 months after the election for staff lodging. There was no staff living there near as Bice can see because the staffers already have their own places, one in Economowoc and one in Beaver Dam. So it was fair to ask, when Bob Donovan's asking people to donate to his campaign, was he instead saying, donate to me so I can be a carpetbagger and live outside the district but run and win? Well, Donovan never returned comments to the Journal-Sentinel, but last week, they write, he did reimburse his campaign just over $5,000 for what it had paid for staff lodging. He forgot to refund his campaign for the $850 back in December of 2024. But as noted by a spokesperson for the state Democratic Party, before he got caught, Bob Donovan was focused on solving his personal affordable housing crisis by using campaign donor dollars to pay for an apartment while ignoring the actual crisis facing his constituents. When we come back, we're going to talk about the 60th anniversary of Medicare, Medicaid, and how instead of a celebration, it appears to be a near death watch after the Midwest Farm Report. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll be talking about the 60th anniversary of Medicare and Medicaid in just a sec. But first, this is what you could call a bifurcated show. We play on various levels at the same time. You could call this the 3D chess of radio shows. And what I mean by that is that all along the 10 stations that we're on in the Civic Media radio network across the state of Wisconsin, a few times throughout the show, some of the local stations will break away and have a local news update, but some of us will continue to jibber jabber here out of Chippewa Falls and talk about other issues. And then we have the opportunity to play that back later the next day for folks who maybe didn't get to hear it the first time. Maybe they were away, or maybe there was a local update, which begs this question. Hey, Pat, how can I always hear what you're doing on here? Here's what you do. You get us as a podcast as well. Go to Spotify and subscribe, follow the program. You can do it at Apple or any place else as well. And that way, if you hear that we've talked to somebody and you missed it and you want to come back to it, very easy to do right there on your device. So, for example, we have a new segment at 7:50 on Tuesday mornings called Way Up North, where we have a rotating series of guests from Superior, Ashland, Bayfield, the whole Lake Superior, South Shore area. And yesterday we talked to State Representative Angela Stroud, who is a freshman lawmaker going through her first state budget process. And so here's part of our conversation about her impressions on the budget and why she was a no vote on it. But first, I asked her to comment on the announcement that Governor Tony Evers would not be running for a third term next year.
I really didn't know in the days leading up whether he was going to run or not. People said, "What's your gut feeling?" And I'm like, don't have one. I'm really 50-50 on it. Tony Evers is a true public servant. He's not one who was in this for ego, not one who had a really hard time letting go of power, I think. And so he did this to serve. He really served well. 2 terms is a lot for a governor. It's a really hard job. He deserves to spend time with his family. He's a truly decent person who I think just wants to go back and be a grandpa and a husband and live life and enjoy it. So I'm really happy for him that he gets to do that and grateful for his service.
And now we get into the mixed bag of politics, and that is to be thankful for his service, but he has faced a fair share of criticism, as have others who are part of the state budget process, that it didn't turn out the way that perhaps it could have, depending on how people use their leverage or their negotiating skills or what have you. And you going through the state budget process for the first time, is it fair to say it wasn't the most positive experience now that you've seen how the sausage is made firsthand?
That is very fair to say. This is not how you should run a state. And, there are people involved in these negotiations who I would refer to them as lions, but that's an insult to lions. They're willing to do whatever it takes to retain power, hold on to power, get what they want. And so, I said Tony Evers is a truly decent person. That's not true of many of the people he's negotiating with. And so it's a really, really difficult thing to watch, the budget process. It is not good governance, things thrown in at the last minute that could never pass if they had to go through the regular legislative process. It's disturbing, and it's not how I hope we do things in the future. But if it is how we do things, then Democrats need to get really savvy about making it work for us and making the best choices we possibly can in a context where we don't always control the rules.
Yeah, especially when you consider that the state budget bill, that's the one bill that must pass, theoretically. And so it gets so much shoved into it that, like you say, would never pass as a standalone measure. For me, the most obvious of those would be the voucher school program. In 30 years, until 2 years ago, it never was up as a standalone bill. It was always crammed into a budget bill, and that's how it got to be the behemoth that it is now. So we have the model that we're going to have for a while yet, and it is a matter of, again, how you're using leverage in negotiations. But now that window is closed for this session, what are your priorities in terms of, trailer bills, follow-up bills, or just, separate legislation that you want to be working on?
There's so much. I mean, there's big picture stuff. A lot of what Democrats are doing right now is preparing to govern after the next election. We know Robin Vos is not going to move any Democratic idea forward in the assembly. That's just a fact. He's made that very clear. And so what we're doing now is setting the groundwork for when dynamics change. I mean, we'll keep trying. There's no quit in Assembly Democrats. But and so for me, there are good governance issues to work on. There are specific pieces of legislation around air quality and environmental issues. There's specific legislation around the UW system. And so I'm working on a range of things. For me, it's always district specific. And, the 73rd has some problems to solve, and that's what I'm here for.
So there again was State Representative Angela Stroud talking to us on the program yesterday in our Way Up North segment. Now let's turn our attention to the calendar and this Wednesday, July 30th, which marks the 60th anniversary of when President Lyndon Johnson signed the Social Security Act of 1965 into law, establishing Medicare and Medicaid. And I think until recently, it was a huge percentage of people that did not really have a clear idea of the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. They sound like these bureaucratic words that get jumbled a lot. And I think more recently, because of the threat to those programs, people are becoming a bit more understanding of the differences between them. Medicare. That's America's promise to its workers that after a lifetime of work, you will have access to health care and not have to worry about illness or injury causing poverty in your old age. 66 million Americans are currently served by Medicare. Medicaid is an American promise of compassion, that those with disabilities will not have to beg on street corners for the health care they need, and that those who fall on tough times will have at least one option for stable, affordable health care when all of the other for-profit private insurance corporations would rather reject you or bleed you dry with jacked up premiums. Now, there are those who say that the 71 million Americans on Medicaid, well, that's too many. I say, why isn't every American deserving of stable, affordable health care? After all, they have figured it out in every other developed country, and in many of those countries, they now have longer lifespans. They have fewer moms and babies dying. They have better education outcomes. So to the MAGA folks who support the Trump big bloated boondoggle of a budget bill, and it's $930 billion, almost $1 trillion of upcoming cuts to Medicaid, because they say too many folks are claiming low enough incomes to qualify. I ask simply, why is that the case in America? In the richest nation on earth, why aren't we doing more to address why so many Americans have incomes low enough to qualify for Medicaid? Why are people who work full-time jobs for some of America's biggest corporations still making so little in pay that they qualify for Medicaid, that our taxes subsidize their health care? Why are the corporations and the billionaires behind them sticking us with the bill? Walmart made $19 billion in profit last year, and a big chunk of its workers make pay low enough to qualify that they're on Medicaid. McDonald's made $8 billion in profit. That's pure profit, and yet has a big chunk of its workers making low enough wages to qualify for Medicaid. Amazon, $59 billion. And still, so many Amazon workers are on Medicaid, coverage that we pay for, that they don't pay for, that they don't pay for health insurance that covers their workers. How could that be? Well, they make big campaign contributions, and they've got people in Congress looking out for them, carving out exemptions. According to the Government Accountability Office, nearly half of adult Medicaid employees, nearly half of adult Medicaid enrollees, 48%, and a little more than half of SNAP beneficiaries, 51%, who get what we used to call food stamps. Okay, about half of adult Medicaid enrollees, about half of SNAP beneficiaries work at least 35 hours a week. And more than half of them work for large companies, meaning 100 or more employees. So it's not that they're working for some tiny business that can't afford health insurance. These companies can, they choose not to. I mean, Republicans cannot stop talking about their glee about adding work requirements to Medicaid, and yet it's clear that lots of working Americans are already on Medicaid, and the ones who aren't can't. The people who love to talk about getting rid of red tape for corporations have become masters of putting red tape in the way of health care through work requirements and all kinds of other paperwork for children, for families, for the disabled, for the elderly, all while cutting red tape and taxes for the very wealthy. So if indeed there are deadbeats, and I don't doubt that there are, but where's the enforcement? Seriously, where? We talked about this with Elon Musk and Doge as well. It is a crime to defraud the government, to defraud the taxpayers. Why isn't this administration, frankly, doing more perp walks? Instead of sending its U.S. attorneys and federal prosecutors against its political enemies, why isn't it making a show of the alleged welfare queens that they say are out there? Because paying for enforcement would mean increasing the budget to an agency, even if it's for the right thing. After all, look at the IRS. What are they cutting there? They're cutting enforcement so that people can continue at high income levels to cheat the system. Whereas if you beefed up enforcement against tax cheats, and if you beefed up enforcement against people who are defrauding Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, or anything else, you'd have a public that was grateful rather than fearful. Look, we've had 60 years to make Medicaid stronger. Instead, it's about to get a lot weaker. We've had 15 years to make the Affordable Care Act stronger. Instead, it's about to get a lot weaker. We've had 20 years to make Medicare Part D stronger. And instead, prescription drug prices are about to get a lot higher. And on top of all of that, on Medicare's side of the equation, there's Medicare Advantage, something that we've talked about previously, with those slick commercials, often with celebrities that say, choose our Medicare Advantage plan because we have so many more bells and whistles. Medicare Advantage is a way for private for-profit insurance companies to get in on the action. They promise all kinds of extra benefits, but what you get instead are networks like the old HMOs, and God forbid you try to go out of network because you'll pay more or you'll get denied your coverage. And you get more denials of coverage under Medicare Access anyway. I mean, there are many who say that Medicare Advantage has turned out to be one big taxpayer scam, and who am I to disagree with them? All told, we are about to see 12 million Americans lose access to affordable health insurance, either through cuts to Medicaid or the Affordable Care Act. And it's not like that happens in a vacuum. When they go without stable, affordable health care, when some of us go without that, the rest of us have to pay for that. So, happy birthday, Medicaid and Medicare. Hopefully we can make you live up to your promise sometime in the near future if you're not killed off in the meantime. Today's history lesson is next. You're up north. There she is.
Hello, hello.
Hi. How are you?
Pretty okay. How are you?
Pretty okay. How's Lilu?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You're looking at something.
Yeah,
I'm assuming Lilo's over there. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the little cave.
In the Cave of Wonders over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Their own little palace.
In that aquarium thing there, right?
It's a dog kennel, but sure.
Oh no, I'm serious. It's a kennel, not a.
Yeah, it's
not
a dog kennel.
Glass size. I can't tell from there. Turn.
Oh, sorry.
Let me
yeah.
let me see. Let me see again. Let me see. Okay. I see
Yeah,
the
the
wires
light,
now.
I guess, makes it look like an aquarium.
Yes, it does.
but-
Yeah.
yeah.
So okay. I just wondered. It reminded me of an old favorite joke of mine, but I don't have time to tell it right now.
Okay.
Oh boy. I
We'll
get
look forward
worried.
to that in the future.
Yeah. I get worried when he says he is thinking of his favorite joke.
Oh God, it's great. It's three guys, and the genie grants them all a wish, and one says he wants to go to a tropical island, and the other, one's a Vikings fan and wants to be on a tropical island, and one's a Bears fan and says, I want to go be on that tropical island too. And I'm tired of these Packer fans; they're idiots. And the Packer fan gets his wish last, and he's like, well, tell me more about this island. Oh, it's surrounded by an impenetrable wall, 50 feet high and 50 feet thick. Well, my wish is you fill it up with water. So I could have told the joke better, but there's only so much time
15 seconds.
Could we have timed that out any better? Talking about Andrew Vaughn and
Isn't that
referring
great?
to him as Wild Thing. And that, by the way, that was a Luke Mathers thing. He didn't know what was in today's history lesson when he suggested Wild Thing for Vaughn. And yet, on this day in 1966, the Trogs hit number one. The number one song in the country 59 years ago today was Wild Thing by the Trogs. Welcome to today's history lesson for this Wednesday. If it's Wednesday, it's Melissa Kay, our friend from 97.5 WFHR, 105.5 WIRI in Wisconsin Rapids, with her co-guest host, Lilu, sitting somewhere off camera.
Yes.
Melissa Kay, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
How is Lilu doing?
Lilu's good. I'm learning how to talk to them.
You're learning how to talk to Lilu?
Yes, I'm learning their. Yes. But I thought it was like a, but that's actually
No, that's
like
a cat. That would scare the bird. Now I see why it's hiding in the cave.
No, it's more like a
Oh, okay.
That's how you say hello. Or
Oh.
I'm here.
Okay. And can we have an update on the pigeon pants? Have they been modeled yet?
No.
Okay. All right.
We're waiting to make contact at their comfort level.
Yes.
Unless I have to trim their nails, which I might have to trim their nails very soon, and that could be traumatic for both of us.
I was going to say that could be, that could put you in the category of Hampton the hamster. You didn't by chance hear us talking about the hamster yesterday at the Chippewa Humane Association?
No, I did not.
Let me remind me to send a clip of that your way. That's
Okay.
It's the best story I've ever
It might
heard.
be your next rescue. You've rescued a
my.
pigeon. You might be rescuing this hamster. Just
They would
don't,
not be friends.
don't put it in the same area as Lilu. That's all we're saying. All right.
Okay.
Back to today's history lesson. Then Melissa's going to tell us about some remotes coming up at WFHR. But on this day in 1974, President Nixon had to release subpoenaed White House recordings, secret recordings in the Oval Office, after being ordered to do so by the U.S. Supreme Court. A little more than a week later, Nixon would have to resign. On this day in 1966, we told you the number one single was Wild Thing. The number one album was the Beatles album, Yesterday and Today.
A real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for
And you're saying, I'm not familiar with the Yesterday and Today album. Well, there's a reason why. The way they did Beatles albums in the U.S. were not the same as the U.K., and a lot of the albums on Yesterday and Today were actually already on the albums Help, Rubber Soul, and the forthcoming Revolver. But that particular U.S. Beatles album hit number 1 this day in 1966. The song Enter Sandman was released this day in 1991 as a single, serving as a preview of Metallica's forthcoming Black Album. Was the Black Album by any chance a part of your collection there, Melissa?
Heck no. I mean, I like it now, but no, then I would never have been able to listen to that.
Well, okay, so you weren't at that end of the spectrum. Let's go to the complete opposite end and wish a happy 84th birthday to singer Paul Anka.
Wow, I just got whiplash.
Yeah, my neck hurts.
Having my baby.
Happy birthday to Bud Selig, 91 years old today. Kate Bush is 67 years old today. Arnold Schwarzenegger is 78. Lawrence Fishburne, 64. Actress Lisa Kudrow is 62. Vivica A. Fox is 61 today. Terry Crews is 57. And one more birthday, Frank Stallone. Do you remember Frank Stallone by chance? Sylvester Stallone's brother? He too was an actor and a singer, and he had what you're about to hear here is the quintessential intro to an 80s song from birthday boy Frank Stallone. Frank?
Uh-huh.
There we go. Man, if this doesn't scream 1983, nothing will.
This rocks.
Oh my gosh.
This is from the 1983 film Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, which makes today the day I learned or relearned that there was a sequel to Saturday Night Fever. You've moved the camera over to Lilu. What is there motion over there?
Out of their cave.
Lilu, look at that.
I see them.
Yeah.
Frank Stallone, you've done it. Apparently, Lilu is a fan of 1980s quintessential rock. Hair bands and leg warmers, which makes sense. They're kind of like pigeon pants. Or Lilu is hungry. Yes, could go either way. This is a big moment. Although, again, the light is so harsh. Oh, flapping the wings and everything.
Yeah, those are happy flaps.
Those are very happy flaps. This is great. I feel like Jane Goodall, and I've finally seen one of the apes come out and, smile or something.
Aww. Lilu has made their radio debut.
Oh, Lilu.
Good job, Lilu.
Good job. Well, there you go. You now know. You now know what does it. It's 80s music. Jimmy Hoffa disappeared this day in 1975 from a parking lot of a restaurant in suburban Detroit, never seen nor heard from again. That's today's history lesson. Let's find out what is happening in Wisconsin Rapids Radio. What else are you up to over there, Melissa?
Well, we do have a huge, big remote this Saturday for the Rapids Rumble. Rapids Car Cruise.
Rapids Rumble.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a car
Rapids
cruise.
Rumble
Okay,
car
I thought it was
cruise.
like the anchor fight in Anchorman or something
it's
like
where
that.
the east meets the west at the river.
Okay, gotcha.
I know, it used to be a thing, but
yes.
no, it's a big car cruise. We'll be at the MSTC, the Mid-State Technical College grounds, I believe, is where we'll be set up. We'll be doing the live remote there. There's food. There's tons of cars, and the cruise will leave at 5 p.m. But it's an all-day thing. It starts at 8.
Wow.
So,
all right.
It's a big deal.
Sounds like a big deal. A lot of fun.
Yep.
All right. Well, Melissa and Lilu, what an exciting segment this was. Thank you. Go cue up some 80s music, maybe Fame or Flashdance, and we'll get an update next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. Have a great day. In our next hour, we'll be talking to a couple of folks from the Chippewa Falls School District about declining enrollment and what it's doing to budgets in school districts across Wisconsin. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm so excited.
I'm so proud of them.
Look what we
came
did.
out. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Oh.
I just hope it was for positive reasons. Lilu was dancing, not coming out to complain or something like, what is that racket out there? So
7 a.m.
Yeah.
God.
So, all right.
How do you stay positive, Pat?
How?
Yeah.
I don't have teenagers here anymore. Once I became an empty nester, I became instantly more positive. It was amazing, and I love my kids.
I just meant all of the terrible news you have to share.
Well, there's that too. It's a defense mechanism. Let's put it that way. I have two defense mechanisms. I have this radio show, and I have bourbon from Tony. Pat Kreitlow, Pigeon Whisperer. I don't know that I was really whispering, but it got us there. I think music is a universal language, and the 70s, 80s gave us all the greatest music ever, which apparently includes Enter Sandman, according to Tony. So that's good.
Awesome.
So, this is what we do. And you keep getting invited back here because you make us positive. You really do. We really appreciate it. Thanks for telling us about the remotes, and let us know if there's anything special you want us to talk up next week.
There'll be more remotes we can talk about. We didn't get to them all because Lilu interrupted, which is totally fine.
Which is totally awesome. All right.
Thanks.
You guys. See you later. Bye.
See you, Melissa.
It is pretty rare to have 3 of the 4 segments for the weekend best of show done already. And even rarer still that the history segment is part of the best of, but that's there. We already know. I don't know. I'm missing one segment, but we're starting with Hammy Hamster. We're ending with Lilu. So we got an animal theme.
Hell
going
yeah.
here. Yep. So we're doing good. We got the animals. We got the animals this week.
That's huge. That rocks.
Live across Wisconsin on Civic Media, you're listening to Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, powered by Up North News. Now, from our Lake Wissota studio, here is the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Kreitlow.
Hey, good morning. It is 7:06. It is nice to have you back here up north on this Wednesday morning, July 30th. Parker Olson is producing this shindig down in Madison Studio A2, and meteorologist Brittany Merlot is standing by. Coming up later this hour is our weekly homeroom segment, where we talk about education in Wisconsin, some of its strengths, opportunities, but also the threats. And one of those is the way the state funding formula works for public education. It stinks, and it has for a long time, for 30 plus years now. There is a phenomenon happening in school districts called declining enrollment, and that makes sense from a demographic standpoint, but it's exacerbated by this voucher program that is sucking money away from our public schools, so that even when there is declining enrollment in a public school district, the loss of state aid is being done in a manner that could be called disproportionate. And the system is really failing school districts like here in Chippewa Falls. And we'll talk to two folks, a school board member and a business manager, about that along the way. And in our 8 o'clock hour, we've got a weird little crossover episode for you where Jim Santel, the former U.S. attorney who's normally here on Fridays, will instead be part of our climate check this week with Melissa Baldoff, talking about all the different climate lawsuits that are going on in the U.S. and other countries in the world court, and how actions there, more so than, say, in Congress, might be our best hope to finally have some cleaner air around our planet. That's all coming up, but first, let's get that forecast update from Brittany Merlot, where I was looking forward to, once this last bit of rain goes through, I was looking forward to something dry and comfortable, but I could see in the very early morning light this morning, looking upriver, I could right away see, oh, our friend the smoke is back. Canada continues to be on fire, and we're going to be noticing that today and tomorrow, Brittany.
Unfortunately, we sure are. It's already out there this morning. Haze across the state, statewide an air quality alert as that wildfire smoke is back. Got winds out of the northwest, so it's dragging it here for us, and that's going to stay the case throughout the day today. Now, we are looking at comfortable temperatures. Unfortunately, not the brightest, most beautiful day. We are going to see more clouds than sunshine, pretty much mostly cloudy to overcast statewide all day, with rain and some thunderstorms far south in the state. That's already happening right now. Temperatures in the 50s up north, low 70s south. We've got heavy rain right now into Janesville, Beaver Dam area, working its way towards the Milwaukee area, probably around 8 or so. And it's packing some heavy rain at times. We've already seen an inch, a little bit over an inch in Evansville and Beloit. And of course, we are looking at up to 2 inches possible because this rain won't stop throughout the afternoon. It actually continues into this evening and doesn't wind down until late tonight. So we could see some flash flooding potential or some localized flooding where those storms just keep training over and over the same area again. So be careful down south today. Otherwise, less rain chances up north. You should stay mostly dry. Just some pesky clouds still in the way. Much more comfortable temperatures though, mid to upper 70s. And it's going to get a little breezy later on this afternoon and evening too. So it'll feel refreshing at the very least.
Okay. Well, refreshing is good. I know that this stuff is supposed to stay to the south, and that's great. I'm still a little gun shy. I'm just far enough up north not to take the top down on the Wrangler yet.
Yeah, not today.
And because you never know when something spotty comes up. And I was looking at my Facebook memories, and it was 7 years ago when it was my first year with this Jeep. And it was that the anniversary of that date when we were out to dinner and we started to see rain. And there was no rain anywhere. There was no line coming at us or anything. And I pull up the radar on my phone really quick, and it's like, one of those little dots just kind of pops up right overhead. And thinking, okay, it'll move, right? It didn't move. The rain kept down. It came harder and harder and harder. And the little dot went from blue to green to yellow to red, like a really bad zit. And instead it popped all over my Jeep Wrangler and filled it with 2 to 3 inches of rainwater.
And then you found out that Wranglers have drain plugs at the bottom, right?
Yeah. My friends were like, aren't you going to go do something about that? I'm like, what can I do? It's already raining like crazy. But the next day was hot and sunny. You pull those drain plugs out, you pull the floor mats out, and 24 hours later, it was good as new by and large. But, for that moment that is happening, you're thinking of all the places one little black rain cloud could show up and just dump on you. It was
your
that.
Storm. That was just
my storm
for you. Yeah,
yes. So I'd been hoping to, take the roof down, but no, not so much.
Not yet.
Let's see. I'm looking at Tom in Hartford on the text line. Brittany, make the smoke go away. Can't do that.
I'm trying. I've got the shield, but it's not working.
Lori from Hayward, can you please give a special shout out to Jack Krachevsky, 101-year-old World War II vet, who was honored at the Brewers game yesterday, and thank him for his service? Done. Thank you for that. I do like that part of the Brewers game where they always thank somebody for their service. That's a very nice thing. Let's see. From Robin Tigerton. Good morning. Smoking 65 degrees. I've got 3 yards to mow in the Tigerton area. Yesterday, he mowed 5 yards. Today would have been his mom and dad's wedding anniversary. Wild Thing was the #1 song when they got married, July 30th of 1966. Also says, thank you, Brittany, for keeping us updated on the tsunami in the Pacific from the earthquake in Russia on her social media last night. Central Wisconsin could have its first extended dry period since Mother's Day back in May. Many farmers will be cutting their 3rd crop of hay. And for the first extended dry spell, many will be baling hay. As a kid on warm, humid weather, it always meant baling hay. It's true. Sherry says she still gets a little itchy, scratchy on days like this, just thinking about being on the hay wagon and stacking all the bales. Doesn't really work like that anymore, by and large, on the farm. But Hans Breitenmoser told us yesterday, he was going to attack that 3rd crop of hay today. But it was a little, getting back to the other thing Rob mentioned, it was a little disturbing to wake up, look at the phone, and the first thing you see is, tsunami warnings all along the West Coast and an 8.8 earthquake off the Russian coast. I mean,
yes, that is so scary. I couldn't go to sleep last night. I saw this happening and I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, that is the 8th strongest ever recorded, tying for 6th with an 8.8 magnitude. That can cause waves. I mean, that could send a 500-mile-per-hour wave across the ocean, right? So that's why those tsunami warnings were going off. You could just see the videos on social media. It was chilling just hearing that. But thankfully, it didn't look too bad out there. I think it got 6 feet above normal in Hawaii and about 3.5 feet above normal waves in California at the moment.
And it's so different now, again, because of technology and other advances, that it's nothing like 2004. And, a lot of us of a certain age, those videos of the tsunami that killed more than 200,000 people around the world, that is seared into our memories. And of course, what happened in Japan several years later. So I'm just hoping that because it wasn't, terribly serious this time, that people don't get complacent in the future about these warnings. We've seen what it can do, but I fear that people will someday forget and just take these warnings for granted. You can't do that.
I fear that too. People do that with the tornado warnings, and it just breaks my heart. Take all of these serious. Please.
Yeah, they're there for a reason, and the reason's not to scare you, but to keep you alive. Brittany, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Let's get back at 7:15 now to Pat and Parker celebrating the Milwaukee Brewers, because we're totally getting ahead of ourselves. We are already assuming there's going to be a sweep this afternoon. Now that we've jinxed it, let's tell you about the win yesterday, because it was so satisfying. I want to play that clip again from the Brewers Radio Network. Have you got that handy with Andrew Vaughn? I can set that up properly, because again, the Brewers were already ahead. They were leading the Cubs, but I don't have what inning Vaughn hit his home run in.
I believe it was the 5th inning.
It was the fifth or sixth. Yeah. Brewers were already up, but this was the exclamation on top of it. Andrew Vaughn, who already has 21 RBIs since being called up from the minors on July 7th, had 6 runs batted in yesterday. 4 of them sounded like this.
Here's now Vaughn and a drive. Left center and deep. Vaughn and
Who wrote this script?
The script of Andrew Vaughn hitting a grand slam and giving the Brewers a win over the Cubs 9-3. They are going to go for the sweep this afternoon at American Family Field against the Cubs. Coverage begins at 12:35 on Civic Media radio stations throughout the network. And let's see, that is now 15 of the last 18 games when you include that 11-game winning streak. Best record in baseball right now at 63-43, a 2-game lead over the Cubs in the National League Central. Hopefully Jackson Churio's right hamstring spasm is not a serious one.
64-43.
64-43?
That's what Google's telling me.
Okay, I'm just going with what the Associated Press is telling me. So you kids go fight it out later on. Quinn Priester started for the Brewers. He now has 10 wins on the season against only 2 losses. And again, they'll go for the sweep this afternoon with Freddie Peralta on the mound. And then the Brewers will be off tomorrow, heading to the nation's capital for a weekend series against the Nationals, then down to Atlanta early next week. And then they'll start a weekend series next week at home against the New York Mets. So a lot to get excited about over the coming days. You'll recall that last week when I did the show in Oshkosh, I had to spend the evening in Beaver Dam. It was the closest place where you could get a hotel that wasn't $500 a night. And the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel had a very interesting piece yesterday about Beaver Dam. It's something that I did not see. I wish I would have taken more notice of as I was in town there, because you could definitely tell in Beaver Dam, like a lot of cities around Wisconsin, you can tell where some businesses used to be and where there's not activity anymore. And you wonder, where's the next thing going to come from? Is the next thing going to come from somewhere? And that is definitely going to be the case in Beaver Dam, where there is now going to be a big new data center going up. One that hasn't been officially announced, but is definitely on the way. Hundreds of workers in skilled trades are starting to put up the buildings. The farmland was sold at a premium price for a data center that's going to be working on artificial intelligence and cloud computing. And the article is just all about the fact that they are now hiring for the construction for the data center. It is a Waukesha-based company that chose Beaver Dam for the location of a 350,000 square foot Generac plant as well, in part because of a blue collar community of culture there. And so I was just very happy to see all of this good work happening around the Beaver Dam area. We're seeing as well data centers going up in Mount Pleasant and Kenosha and Port Washington. Now, all of this, as we have talked about in our climate check segments in the past, does come with some caveats. There is something about, all of the water that is going to be involved in cooling these data centers. That's a lot of computing power and could have, impact on wells in the area. And more that we don't know about yet. So I'm not telling you that these data centers are going to be a cure-all, but for the current next wave of jobs in Wisconsin communities, if done right, these are things that are positive aspects for some of our smaller communities around the state of Wisconsin, and it was just very nice to read about that. A local update is coming up next for some of you. Others will continue here and have our homeroom segment in 15 minutes. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. Little reminder here to sign up for our newsletters at upnorthnewswi.com. Click subscribe up in the top banner. That would include our weekend politics newsletter, Sunday Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, which includes our question of the week, which this week deals with cryptocurrency, something that we don't have to deal with a lot here. Although, back to our topic of data centers, I mean, there's just more computing than ever before is needed to, quote unquote, mine cryptocurrency. I feel like we need a cryptocurrency 101 segment here about why it takes so much computer power to create the next Bitcoin or whatever crypto is. And is it worth it for all of the energy that it takes, the electricity and the water and everything else it takes to do these immense, complex computer calculations that create cryptocurrency? And then there's a whole matter of buying it, selling it, spending it. Who should make the rules? We saw in Congress last week, Republicans bending over backwards to make the rules friendly to the cryptocurrency industry, while at the same time claiming that there are consumer safeguards and stability in cryptocurrency. Call me skeptical, but what do you think? I'm sure some of you have friends, associates, if not yourself, who are all in, saying this is absolutely the way of the future. You just need to learn more about it. This is a great development compared to those dirty paper dollars, and you're all in. Others will say, nope, I just don't know enough yet. I'm not saying no, but I definitely need to learn more. And others saying, no, absolutely not. Either I'm convinced it's a scam or I'm just skeptical enough. No way should the U.S. government be using my tax dollars to be involved in cryptocurrency. We just want to know where you are right now, so we're taking your temperature. So if you're a subscriber to the newsletter, you can respond right there, or you can subscribe at upnorthnewswi.com by clicking subscribe in the top banner. And you can always, of course, send us a text message using the Civic Media app, or you can put a comment on Facebook or YouTube, or you can send us an email, radio@upnorthnewswi.com, to learn more and tell us your thoughts on crypto. It's our question of the week. This next story is far, far from Wisconsin, but it does involve one of our favorite sports here, baseball. And it's just another sign of the times that we have an administration so hostile to countries, well, all other foreign countries, especially those where the folks there don't have white skin, because one of the Little League international tournaments is going to be played here in the U.S. without one of its teams because the team from Venezuela was denied visas into the United States, and those kids will be forced to miss the Senior League Little League World Series for the first time. That's a series for players between the ages of 13 and 16. And the Venezuelan team said they had been notified they would not get the appropriate visas. They say, well, this is extremely disappointing, especially to these young athletes. The Little League International Tournament Committee made the decision to instead advance the second place team, the one the Venezuelan kids defeated, from Mexico. This is all because of a June executive order from President Trump that limits entry into the U.S. from certain countries. Basically, it's another version of the Muslim travel ban, but this time against other countries for ambiguous reasons. Venezuela is one of the countries that currently faces a limited ban. And again, it's based on Donald Trump's whims. It's not every country that has a government that is not necessarily living up to democratic ideals. I mean, for those intents and purposes, we're not exactly living up to the full potential of our democratic ideals. But you're going to have these kids now who are not going to get a chance to take part in something that they have earned the right to play in. And it simply begs this question. Excuse me. The Olympics are coming up in Los Angeles in a couple of years. Parker, as I take a sip of coffee, it's pretty clear to see there's some teams that are going to think twice about coming here to Los Angeles for the Olympics or any other sporting event.
There's the Olympics, there's the World Cup. There's so much going on in the U.S. that attracts world tourism. There are so many people from around the world coming to the U.S., especially for sports right now in the next couple coming years.
Oh my
It's
gosh. I mean, tourism's
so
cratering right now.
it's just so odd that you would want to make it more difficult for people who are going to come and be tourists and spend money in your economy and make it hard for them to be here.
And let's not forget that sports was also one of the beacons of America to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen as much as it used to, but especially in the old days of the Soviet Union, it was sports tournaments where athletes would defect to the United States because they wanted to be here. They saw the ideals that we espouse here. And now we're shutting off the possibility that anybody from other countries would want to come here to compete, to participate, to travel, because they see such hostility. And I don't know how the MAGA folks think we're supposed to make that up in the economy. They're not going to say, well, the rest of us should go to Niagara Falls more often and be tourists. I mean, it can't work that way because we're busy working, extra time to afford the health insurance premiums that are going to get jacked up. So and it's not just Los Angeles, it's not just the World Cup. There are sports tournaments that happen here in Wisconsin. There's international travel and business that is not going to take place here in Wisconsin as a result. And of course, there's the trade war involving tariffs and other, hostile relations that are all eating into our economy. So our one little story there about a little league team in Venezuela may sound distant, may sound like it doesn't apply here, but it is essentially the canary in the coal mine for all that still could happen if we have an administration that is allowed to, rampage unchecked through all the goodwill and diplomacy that the United States has built up over the years and essentially is dousing that beacon to the world that we had always been for all these years. We'll have our homeroom segment coming up right after the Midwest Farm Report across the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm Pat Kreitlow. And there's Chad. How are you?
Good morning, Pat. Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good. Good to see you there. Thanks for doing this and for kind of just shedding that whole light on declining enrollment and, what it means, and how you can deal with it and what the legislature needs to do about it. Any other aspects about it that you want to make sure I get into?
Well, I think the legislative action is probably going to lead to the likelihood of us having to go to another referendum for operations, but I'll probably touch on that at some point, but I just want to make sure that we're planting the seed that this action will likely lead to our need for another operational referendum down the road.
Oh, I shudder at the thought of how many districts are going to be doing that and have to do it over the next 2 years. And
I think the statistics, there's already 85% of the schools that have passed an operational referendum, and obviously they're going to have to pass more, and probably the other 15% are going to have to do it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, sounds good. Well, you look good there. Sound good, and we will. Let me see. Let me get back to my notes over here.
I don't know about the look good part, but I'm glad I sound good.
the camera looks good. I can't speak for the rest of how I look. I just know that my camera's looking good, and that's I got to go with
Thank
that.
you.
I got to go with what I'm working with here. Let's see, and then. I haven't seen any email from Peggy, so I don't know if she's acknowledged getting the email and will be joining us or not. So
I guess I haven't heard from her. I just assumed that she did.
I was hoping so as well. So, all right. Well, either way, we are back in 3 minutes. So I will tuck you in the waiting room and come get you in a little bit.
Thanks, Pat.
See ya. Coming up later today on the Civic Media Radio Network, the Maggie Dawn Show from 4 until 6. Coming up today in the 4 o'clock hour, Morris Pearl will discuss the wealthy who don't want a tax break, part of an op-ed in the Washington Post recently. And also in the 4 o'clock hour, Lisa White, a candidate in the 17th State Senate District, where there may be a number of Democrats looking to run against Howard Markline, the State Senate co-chair of the legislature's Joint Finance Committee. That all coming up on the Maggie Dawn Show later this afternoon across the Civic Media Radio Network. Let's take some time right now in our homeroom segment to talk a bit about declining enrollment, state aid, and school referendums. And regular listeners understand how this carousel works. And so rather than listening to me blather on about it, we wanted to bring in an expert, a business manager from one of the school districts where declining enrollment is an issue, and explain how the current state funding system either helps or hurts school districts that are hit with declining enrollment, which again is happening for a couple of different reasons. It's not just demographics. It's not just, a generational drop in birth rates. It's also the growth of the voucher program, peeling away kids whose parents are sending them to private, usually religious schools, and now getting taxpayer-funded assistance, subsidies, to do so. It only makes the declining enrollment problem worse for districts like Chippewa Falls, where Chad Trowbridge is the business manager and joins us this morning. Chad, good morning. How are you?
I'm great, Pat. Good morning to you, and thanks for having me today.
Well, we appreciate it. We really respect the job that you do, and we know what a challenge that it is. So let's just start overall with the matter of declining enrollment. I mean, there are only so many school districts that actually are growing population. We don't have that baby boom going on anymore. So we know that declining enrollment is, kind of a regular way of life in so many of our Wisconsin school districts. But do we have a system in place right now so that business managers like you can look at these numbers and say, well, enrollment's declining, but, not in a way that's going to cause us to have to make some dire financial choices?
Well, yes, it is definitely a problem statewide, not just for Chippewa Falls. I should point out, I think we were an anomaly over the past 20 or 30 years, while many school districts, certainly in northern Wisconsin and even in the Chippewa Valley were declining in enrollment. We were on a growth pattern. So it was a little unique here in Chippewa Falls. We kind of stood out as a place that was growing. And I think, primarily it's the demographic shift that probably has caught us the most. I think we were going to start to experience a decline at the start of the pandemic. That was kind of the first indicator for us that, our lower birth rates entering our kindergarten grades were starting to get smaller. But I do think that the pandemic probably exacerbated that problem just a little bit. It helped or encouraged people to pursue other educational options, be it virtual, be it homeschool. A lot of school age kids went to work during that time. Learning virtually was something that what we found out wasn't the best for the majority of our population. So if, I think there's a lot of reasons for declining enrollment. Certainly the first, you mentioned the demographic shift. Part of it's not scientific. People just don't have as many kids as they used to. And when I say that, a lot of people nod their head. Yep. A lot of people we know either don't have kids or have one kid or two kids. Having three kids was a fairly normal sized family a good number of years ago, but you just don't see families that large anymore. Secondly, I think we have an affordable housing problem in our community. And when I say that, I don't mean low income housing. I mean just the affordability of living, whether it be rental property or purchasing a home. The median home price is higher than two income earners with good jobs can't afford. That's not going to encourage families to come to our community. Another piece that we often wonder about is jobs. We're a big employer for the size of the city of Chippewa Falls. There are a lot of jobs in our community, but are they jobs that cause people to move here? We believe that a good portion of our jobs here are commuter jobs, meaning people who live in the periphery of Chippewa Falls drive here to come to work. And then also, much like many communities, there's a shortage of daycare spaces available. We're pretty blessed in Chippewa Falls to have very high quality daycares. There just aren't enough of them. And if we have commuters coming to Chippewa Falls for employment, perhaps bringing their kids to daycare, it just makes that lack of daycare space all the much worse. And like you mentioned, there are other educational options, which is probably a good thing for parents and students to have choices in education. But ultimately, those factors all contribute to kind of the statewide decline in enrollment. And we're actually going to see a demographic shift in our total population. In Chippewa Falls, the largest portion of our population is an older generation, which at some point in time, will turn over. I hate to say it that way, but when that occurs, we're curious about what's going to happen with real estate and homes, and what's going to turn into those properties. Are they going to become rentals? Are they going to become family homes? Or are they going to turn into something else?
Yeah, these are all valid questions when you talk about, commuter employment. Another one of them is virtual. We've seen some small communities essentially reinvent themselves by saying, hey, we're the place where you can live, and we've put in broadband internet so that you can continue to, work from up north in your office in Chicago, or New York, or wherever the case may be. Chippewa Falls has also seen, of course, like other communities, jobs come and go, whether it's, Cray supercomputers or Mason Shoe back in the day. Just a big shift in technology versus manufacturing and high-tech manufacturing. I spoke earlier this hour about Beaver Dam and how its fortunes are being turned around by a data center that's going in, and that might be the linchpin for new enrollment. But again, every school district is facing its challenges with declining enrollment at some point in time for all the reasons that you outlined. And so here's where we get into the notion of how does state aid help or hurt in that situation. So the two examples I always use are classrooms and school buses. You might go from a classroom of 25 kids to 22 kids. You might have a school bus that goes from, carrying 40 kids to 35 kids. You still got to turn on the lights. You still got to put gas in the bus because it's going to take pretty much the same route, just skip a few houses. And yet with declining enrollment, how is it that you lose state aid? Is it a one-for-one thing, or is there a way that can be augmented without having to go to the property taxpayer?
I'll touch on that, and I'm going to shift gears for just a second. So state aid is really a factor of the expenses the district makes per property value per student. So if we have a high student population and a high property value, that kind of works out pretty well economically. But if we have a low student population and a high property value, and you think about some of our more northern region school districts, at least that's the best example here we have locally, they have a very low student population, but a very high property value. The state aid formula doesn't really benefit them at all. But it really comes back to the revenue limit. Revenue limits were put in place for Wisconsin schools back in 1994. And it was really a kind of a three-pronged approach to ultimately controlling property taxes at the time. And they called it the three-legged stool. It was based on the premise of a revenue limit, the qualified economic offer, and 2/3 funding of education at the state level. Well, the qualified economic offer went away with Act 10 in around 2011, 2012. And then the 2/3 funding commitment for state aid has also gone away. So the only prong that's left is revenue limits. And ultimately, for a lot of schools that were not in declining enrollment, the revenue limit just hadn't kept pace with inflation. And for us, during the time of the pandemic, there was a lot of federal money that was thrown at education. And the intent of that money was to bolster education. Well, here in Wisconsin, there weren't revenue limit increases. And the message was loud and clear: use your federal dollars to plug your budget hole. We were all saying, hey, okay, well, that can work. We understand that, but we have to have a way to backfill that federal revenue when it goes away. And in the last biennial budget, I think our state did as good as they can. They did increase the revenue limit, but it was only about half of what was lost from the exit of federal funding. So we were saying that in this 25-27 biennial budget, our state is going to have to double down because school districts were still short of revenue. They didn't get inflationary increases during that time. And it was at a time when we've seen some of the highest inflation rates in the past decade. So that kind of has compounded over time. And if you recall, Governor Evers used his veto pen to give school districts a $325 per pupil increase for, at the time, it was 400 years. Well, there's 398 years remaining in that. So we are going to get a $325 per pupil increase. That's great, but it doesn't backfill any of that revenue. And when we talk about this $325 per pupil, it's a good increase. It's less than 3%. So it sounds like a lot of money, but it's really not. It's really just, plus or minus inflation here or there. And I always say before Act 10, when revenue limits were indexed to inflation, we were seeing consumer price index and the revenue limit at $271 per pupil. So 271 13 years ago versus 325 today really doesn't make up a gap anywhere. So in the revenue limit, that's made up of two factors. It's state aid and property taxes. So if there's an increase in the revenue limit, it should technically be split between state aid and property tax. The legislature did not put any money into the state aid formula. So when we look at this year's revenue limit, it's going to increase taxation at a time where state aid is not going to go up. So it's going to create a local burden here. And really for any school district in the state of Wisconsin, there will be some aid distribution based on each individual school district statistics. But for us, we're very close to average, so we would expect it to be fairly neutral. So when we went, Chippewa Falls School District went to an operational referendum in 2024, and we did that for 3 years. We had some declining enrollment issues, some exit of federal funding issues that were creating a deficit for us. We did a 3-year operational referendum, $2.5 million a year for 3 years, because we wanted to get through this biennial budget process to determine if revenue was backfilled, there would lessen the need for an operational referendum. But if it was not sufficient, we would have to go back to an additional operational referendum at some point in time. So,
and I definitely see that is that's in the cards for many school districts when you put $0 new into it. It's a great explanation of the situation. Chad Trowbridge, the business manager for the Chippewa Falls Area Unified School District. Thank you very much for the background on it, Chad. I know what a challenging time this is, but thanks for taking a little time to offer up some explanation and background for our listeners.
Thanks for having me, Pat. I appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great day. Local update is next for some of you. Others, we'll talk to Jimmy Kuska about some of the stories that he is following. And as a school board member himself, may have a few things to say about, coming up from our homeroom segment. And in our next hour, we'll be talking to Earl Ingram. We'll be getting an update from James Kelly from Civic Media about headlines he's covering around Northwest Wisconsin. So much still ahead here on the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm Pat Kreitlow. You're up north. All right, we are clearing a break. Chad, thank you. That was so awesome. I really appreciate the background.
You're welcome. We didn't touch on vouchers too much, but we can maybe do that another time if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, and I hit it a lot, and we got just a brief mention in the intro, so people know it's there. But I got no problem coming back to that. So I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks again for having me. Have a great day.
See ya. And how is Jimmy doing today?
I don't think I can offer you a better explanation of all this stuff than what he just said. That was amazing.
Yeah, it really was. I just wanted him to keep going, but I'm like, we're getting a good lesson here.
It's so complicated. The school funding stuff is so complicated, and I know when I first started on the board, that was like the number one thing I felt like I had to learn the most about. Yeah. I still probably don't know everything there is to know about it, but I have at least some better idea of it.
Yeah. Well, a little knowledge is not a dangerous thing at all, Jimmy. That's,
yeah. I mean, every time I go to the state convention, that's what I do is I spend my time I need to learn more about how schools are financed so I can advocate for better ways, and sound smart doing it. But yeah,
exactly. All right. I got your list here, so we'll get going in 2 minutes.
Sounds good.
All right. We've got some familiar voices coming up across the Civic Media Radio Network throughout the course of the day here. Matt and Air on Air coming up after this program from 9 to 11 with Jane Matt and Greg Bach. Dr. Kristen Lyerly will be joining Jane and Greg at 9:30. Dan Schaefer from the Recombobulation area and Civic Media political editor will be joining them just after the 10 a.m. news here. And then on the Todd Alba Show, starting at 2 o'clock. Well, yours truly will be there to kick off the show at 2:05. And then Trygve Olsen, senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, will be joining Todd as well across the Civic Media Radio Network. The Civic Media Radio Network also employs this young man named Jimmy Koska, who's also the sports director. He's also a school board member in Boscobel. And it's always fun to watch him in the on-deck circle during our homeroom segment. Sometimes he's just itching to get in there and say something about, what we're saying about school boards and education. And other times he hears a guest and, Jimmy, what was it you just said about Chad Trowbridge's explanation about declining enrollment?
I just think it was funny because you were trying to set it up like, hey, we might talk a little bit more about this with Jimmy coming up. And I'm like, oh, no, Mr. Trowbridge did a fantastic job of explaining all this. I don't need to say anything. He did awesome. So.
Have nothing else to add. Just get this show by podcast and listen back to it again, and you'll get an amazing explanation of the situation that we have out there, which I know we've covered in the past. It's just the complexities of how we pay for schools in this state and the burden that puts on every local school board member, many of which they're just moms and dads or taxpayers that just want to do a little bit of public service, serve on their school board, and then boom, here's a bunch of 3-ring binders. Try to understand how this state formula works. Good luck,
Yeah, but a lot of our board meetings are spent sometimes just asking about like why is it like this? Like how are schools funded? How are what does this line in the spreadsheet mean? It is really, really complicated, even for people who spend time working on it. It was interesting listening to your previous guest talk about just kind of the future of a district the size of Chippewa Falls, because that future kind of already exists in smaller school districts where, the population has aged out. I think the average population right now in the county I live in is actually 59 years old. So you can see it happening already in more rural areas of the state where, with property values and property use and things like that, and how that contributes to some of the issue facing school funding. I thought there was a really interesting piece written by Jamie Nutter of CISA 3. He's the director of CISA 3. About 6 months ago, he wrote a piece talking about ways to help with school funding. And one of those ways was, it sounds pretty simple, but in a way, it's also very smart. And that's just to work with municipalities on building additional housing, just getting more people into a district to lessen that tax burden on others. And I mean, as a concept, it sounds a little bare, but the way he went in depth into it, worth a whole segment on its own. But there are some definite challenges facing school districts, declining enrollment obviously being part of that. But there are a lot of things that are tied to other policy as well. It's not just, hey, it's school funding policy. That's the only issue here. I mean, he hit on everything that we talk about, whether it's broadband funding, infrastructure, housing, all those things contribute to some of the challenges facing schools right now.
All right, let's get to something that is not quite so complex, and that would be drinking fountains or bubblers, depending on your vernacular in your part of the state. And La Crosse has some rather historic drinking fountains or bubblers, but as is the case with a lot of things historic, they may not necessarily be in step with modern day requirements. And it's led to a bit of a problem bubbling up there. You see what I did, Jimmy? So what's La Crosse's bubbler problem?
Yeah, so the bubbler problem, all right? So, and they don't use these words interchangeably. The existing places people can drink water at, they refer to as bubblers because they are true to the Wisconsin brand bubblers. They're old, they're green, they're everywhere in the city. And they've been shut off this year because they are not ADA compliant. So no one's been able to use them in all these heat waves we've had this summer, right? So the city council, the officials, the mayor, it's actually the mayor, Shondell Washington Spivey, who proposed this to put in drinking fountains that are ADA compliant around the city so that people can have free public access to drinking water, which, as you know, in La Crosse, one of the big issues is homelessness. Also, obviously, with it being so hot, it's just nice for people to be able to grab a drink of water here and there, right? So there's a resolution going through committee right now in La Crosse to address the situation of the existing bubblers not being ADA compliant and putting in ADA compliant drinking fountains instead. But there's also a contingent of the city council and city officials that want to preserve these old green bubblers that are not ADA compliant and preserve them for historical purposes. One of the resolutions even calls for adding like plaques to these things, just to say, hey, this honors the history of Wisconsin. Even the word bubbler originates in Wisconsin. Let's preserve some of the history, even if it means keeping those things off. So there's kind of two competing things happening with this issue in La Crosse. And I'm fascinated by these things in local government personally, because it really speaks to that issue of trying to solve a modern problem, but also trying to honor some of the history in a lot of these places. And it can be drinking fountains, it can be buildings, but these things that come up in local government can be absolutely fascinating sometimes.
But Jimmy, I'm curious, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, dates back to 1990. And it doesn't sound like there's like any pending lawsuit right now against the city. So, I mean, it's been 35 years. Why now? Are they saying, well, they're not compliant, so let's shut them off before we get sued? I mean, call me suspicious, but I almost wonder if it's a way to address the problem of homelessness and not offer these facilities for people. I don't know that, but I find it odd that a 35-year-old law is being invoked right now.
Yeah, it is odd, and it is something that has been called out too by the people that are advocating to keep them in place. Because I think one of the council members even had said that nobody's asking for these to be turned off. Why can't we turn them back on? And like nobody's complained about this. Like it's really really fascinating. Like I said, because of all the issues you mentioned as well.
Well, and again, just because something's old doesn't mean it always has to stay there either. You can always put a new green drinking fountain in there that is compliant. Costs money, but not everything old has to sit there just because it's old. Jimmy Koska, thank you for the update as always. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Earl Ingram is coming up along the way, and then we'll have our climate check with Melissa Baldoff and former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel in our 8 o'clock hour on the Civic Media Radio Network. All right, there we go. So, yeah,
oh my goodness.
Sorry, that doesn't mean to cast aspersions, but that just that strikes me as curious.
It is, and the thing is that's where I was going to go next with it anyway. So you led right into what I wanted to mention, is that one of the council members is like, "Hey, no one's complained about this. Why did we turn them off?" So they're asking the same question.
Well, and I just know from being in Madison last week as well, is that, I mean, of all the nuts that are tough to crack in local government, homelessness is one of the big ones.
La Crosse is kind of famous for its policy shifts, like banning public space camping, just spending a bunch of money on security for parking ramps to keep people out, and in parks too. Like there's some real, like La Crosse is probably, of all the homelessness issue markets in our network, it's probably the most interesting one just from policy, just because it's like a constant issue, and it comes up like pretty much every month in whatever board packet. So.
Yeah, no. Like I said, no easy answer there. All right, Jimmy, thanks. Appreciate it.
Take care, man.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right. Let's see. And Earl, I see you there. I'm going to pop you up in just about 60 seconds here and ask you what to do for the segment today. But first, let me throw a splash of coffee in my cup, and I will be right back. All right, Earl, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Excuse me. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. All right, let me get down to that part of my notes here.
Is the sound good?
It does. It sounds a little muffled, but otherwise it sounds fine.
Just want to double check quick. Is the blue light on that
blue light is on.
Blue light's on. Okay, cool.
Yep. You're clearly speaking into it, so that is you. Let's see. Let me get over to the show page here. You got a few new things here. You got more with Dr. Fuller. You got Dr. Omar. You got let's see, Frida Webb and Paul Blackman.
Dreams Deferred is 6 decades of discrimination in the Milwaukee in the trades in the city of Milwaukee, and so they've done some research on that, a book that they've written, and so I'm doing several different podcasts on that. Dr. Fuller, I'm doing my 3rd podcast with him this morning. We're going to do a 5-part series with him. This will be the 3rd one. And then one thing I really wanted to talk about was police chases. And it's been an issue that I've been talking about for at least the last 10 years. And another, innocent pedestrian, I think they're up to 6 already this year, who loses their life because of police chases. And I just think, and if you look nationally, this is a major issue. Yeah, I just think we can do a better job than chasing people into, neighborhoods and through lights and to apprehend that person. I just think it's in 2025 with the technology we have, we don't have to chase.
No, we shouldn't have to. Any thoughts on Sheila Stubbs trying for a 3rd time to create a missing and murdered African American women and girls task force?
Well, I think that people know that there's a difference when there's a black child that's missing. She is 100% correct. There's documentation that will bear that out, but I don't know if it didn't pass the first 2 times, what makes people think is going to pass the 3rd time.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. All right. I think we're all good to go. We'll get going in 90 seconds here.
All right.
See you after the weather.
Live across Wisconsin on Civic Media, you're listening to Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, powered by Up North News. Now, from our Lake Wissota studio, here is the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Kreitlow.
Good morning. It's 8:06. It's nice to have you here up north for our 8 o'clock hour on this Wednesday, July 30th. Parker Olson produces us down in Madison in Studio A2, and meteorologist Brittany Merlot will be joining us in just a sec. Coming up shortly, we'll be talking to Civic Media's Earl Ingram about his podcast, What's Going On, including some of the guests and stories that they are telling. Then in our next half hour is our weekly climate check, where Melissa Baldoff and I talk about climate headlines. Well, we're bringing in a little help this time around. Melissa and I will be talking to former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel. You normally hear him Friday mornings, and of course he has Amicus, the show of his every Saturday, and then replayed on Sunday mornings. And we're going to talk about the climate crisis in courts around the world and here in the U.S., and looking for other ways to prod along the process of, not killing our planet, and seeing if we can get it done in courts instead of in Congress. That's ahead in the next half hour. But first, back to meteorologist Brittany Merlot, who is following some rain, essentially working its way from, Wausau to, or not Wausau, what am I trying to say? La Crosse to Stevens Point to Appleton. Anywhere south of there, you got a little busy radar, except at first I thought there was something wrong with my radar, that the screen was kind of like fuzzy. And then I zoomed out and I realized that's like almost all of Wisconsin's covered in a watch box for air quality. It's going to be one of those days again today, Brittany.
It really is. I mean, it depends where you are in the state. If you're up north, you're going to be battling the thicker wildfire smoke. The air quality is unhealthy. It is in the red levels right now, pretty much from Green Bay through Wausau into Eau Claire and north. So those are the areas that have less likely chances of getting rain today. Now, a pop-up shower or storm is possible later this afternoon and into this evening. A very, very small chance, like a 20% chance. But I'm throwing it out there just so it doesn't surprise you. Also this morning up north, foggy conditions, spots of sunshine, but again, those rain and storms pushing through the southern part of the state. Right now, it's pretty heavy right outside of Milwaukee. In the next 30 to 40 minutes or so, the heaviest of the rain will be over downtown, and we are looking at anywhere from a half an inch to an inch and a quarter from this just little wave pushing through. And we've more rain throughout the afternoon, and it continues into this evening before it winds down far south overnight tonight. So we could see some flooding potential. There is a watch in northern Illinois. We are kind of included that on the state line as well. Now, the watch hasn't been issued, but I'm letting you know that the precipitation values are definitely there. We could get up to 2.5 possible. So some gusty winds too, up to 50 miles per hour, have been seen early this morning. Again, this is for far southern parts of the state today, where you're seeing that system really track through. Up north, we're seeing that northwest breeze and that wildfire smoke. But highs all across the board today will be in the mid to upper 70s. The further north you are, the warmer you're going to get. The further south, the more clouds and much cooler. But overall tomorrow, the rain clears on out. The wildfire smoke wants to stick around, but we stay crisp and comfortable.
I feel like, yes, you're getting it all out of your system. You and Mother Nature are telling you all this stuff, and then tomorrow, it'll just be quiet. We'll just be talking about more tranquil weather. We won't need as many verbs and adjectives for it all.
I can't wait.
You've definitely earned it. Thank you, Brittany. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Let's turn our attention now to Earl Ingram. He's got the What's Going On podcast. You can get it over at civicmedia.us. Click on shows, where you can see not only all of the regular weekday shows, the weekend shows, but also special podcasts as well. And we are very blessed to have Earl doing that for us. Earl joining us now to talk about what he's working on this week. Earl, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Pat?
I'm doing all right, thanks. Let's start by looking at the podcast here that you're working on, and the working title I see here is Dreams Deferred. And I want to hear more about the decades worth of community issues that you're looking at in the latest edition of your podcast.
So Dreams Deferred is a book that describes 6 decades of discrimination against African Americans in the trades, especially the construction trade industry. And it certainly has been an area that, has brought some alarms to people who've been talking about this for a long time. The trades happen to be an area where there's a strong middle class reality that is garnered from the trades: a steam fitter, electrician, plumber, carpenter. Those types of jobs are guaranteed strong middle class. They don't require a college degree. You don't have to go into debt to become a tradesperson. And once you become a journeyman tradesperson, like they always say, they can never take that education away from you for life. And the other aspect of this is, while all other jobs seem to be endangered by AI, the trades are one area that aren't ever going to be taken away by technology. And so they've been able to find and track this and see that these trades have basically, once you're in, your children are in, your grandchildren are in, and this is passed down through families. And unfortunately, like so many other things, blacks weren't involved in it early on, and so they're not involved in it now. And where this becomes a big issue is when there are contracts that are governmental contracts and taxpayers that don't include people of color.
Is it when you talk about, it says here, the promise of a people is postponed, rejected, or overlooked. And you talked to a couple of NAACP members who authored the book Dreams Deferred. What is it specifically? Because again, like you said, you can't take that education away. Is the problem attaining the education, or that once they have that education in skilled trades, that it's hard to find work?
Well, so what actually happens is there are many people who are qualified through the educational process. What it is once you get that education, now you must go yourself and seek employment. And there is no automatic in. If you have it, you have to go to some firm or some company and try to get in. And so that's where the problem lies. There is no tracking of that. And so, it's between you and you brokering the deal yourself with whoever that company is, that construction company is, or whomever. And so, there is no tracking of that, and that's where the problem lies.
Okay. We're talking to Earl Ingram, and he's talking about his podcast, What's Going On. You can get that at civicmedia.us/shows, or just go to the homepage and click on shows. And Dreams Deferred includes the guests Frida Webb and Paul Blackman, and that's one of the topics that you can find in Earl's podcast. But Earl, I also want to ask you about an ongoing problem in Milwaukee that is so overdue to be addressed. It gets talked about a lot, and it's pedestrian deaths from reckless driving, but also from police chases. And it just, again, seems like, I don't want to use the term, how is this a thing? But I almost feel like, the old style police chase is not something that is as necessary as it used to be.
So for over 10 years, I have been outspoken about police chases. I've never understood why, with the new technology, police have to chase, wayward guys in these cars who are running away from police. I'm not supporting any criminal activities. What I'm saying is, why endanger the lives of innocent people because you want to make a collar? And so now I think we're up to about 7 here in Milwaukee already this year. But this is, again, a national issue. And the fact that, there are different ways, that you can make this happen without chasing someone through a red light. Well, I know the police say, well, we saw that he was driving recklessly and we chased him and we saw that it looked like he was going to keep going and he's doing 80 miles an hour. And now we finally called it off. Well, you should have thought about that before you start chasing somebody in a heavy populated area at 3 in the afternoon. where people are getting off work or innocent citizens are crossing the streets. And so this, again, is not solely a Milwaukee problem. This is a national problem. And if anybody wants to look it up, it's been going on for a long, long time all over this nation. And we're at a point where something has to be done. And now, there are people who support it until it's their loved one who has lost their life.
Well, yeah. And again, it's not, two wrongs don't make a right, is what I'm trying to say here. You don't save lives by going after a reckless driver by also engaging in reckless driving. You're simply encouraging the problem when there are ways through, again, there's license plate cameras, there's all kinds of other tracking, there's drones, especially, you name it, that we should be seeing a reduction in these kinds of episodes rather than an increase with such deadly results. There's one more episode I wanted to ask you about. You have your friend Dr. Omar on, the pharmacist, occasionally, just talking about, promoting good health practices. And I always enjoy seeing that because, again, we can talk about politics all day. We can talk about the problems in our communities all day. But every so often, we have to be reminded to take good care of ourselves. And I always like that you make a little time for that as well.
So this episode is really an important episode because what happens is there are people who are being turned down. The doctor prescribes medication for you, and Medicare or other insurance companies are the arbiters of whether or not you get that medication. And so there's this situation that occurs where, okay, so the doctor prescribed the medication for you. You're waiting to get the medication. You go to the pharmacy. The pharmacist says, well, this hasn't been okayed. And so time goes on, weeks go on. You don't get the medication that was prescribed to you by your doctor. And now you're caught in this black hole between the insurance company and the doctor. And I'm sure many people in your listening audience have had to deal with this. So we address that issue. It is an ongoing problem, a major problem between the insurance company and the doctor on whether or not they're going to cover medications that are prescribed by the doctor. Really important conversation that we had.
Okay, and that's the point, is to be, sometimes you've got to be your own best healthcare advocate and get that advice and that guidance from Dr. Omar, the pharmacist, and from Earl Ingram on the What's Going On podcast. Head over to civicmedia.us, click on shows, and look for it and subscribe there. Earl, as always, I appreciate the chance to catch up. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great rest of your week out there.
You as well.
All right. Thank you very much. A local update is going to be coming up next for some of you. And then when we're all back together in about 15 minutes or so, we'll have our climate check segment with Melissa Baldoff, including a special guest this time around, because we're going to talk about the ways that climate issues are finding their ways into courts increasingly, both here in the States and in other countries. And even the World Court is taking on the issue of a changing climate and what constitutes justice for people whose health is being imperiled by those who care less about our climate and our atmosphere than they should. That's all ahead here on the Civic Media Radio Network. Mr. Santel, how are you?
I'm doing well, Pat. How are you?
Good. Hey, do you want to come on a little earlier in this next segment and give us some background on this Emil Bovee?
I would be happy to. Well, happy is too strong a word, isn't it? Right? I would be distant. For you and Parker, anything, but for America, not so much.
Gotcha.
So, anyway,
and am I saying it right? Is it Bovee?
I've heard it pronounced in different ways, and I actually Googled it, and it's not clear. So I've been saying Bovee, but it may be Bovee.
I only say because there's you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a Bovee up here, but it's Bowe up here, so I wasn't really sure. All right, well we'll just play with both.
Happy to jump on. You bet. Absolutely.
Amicus.
Amicus, right? You say potato, I say Parker says potato,
exactly.
But he's strange. So
and he spells it with an E, even if it's singular.
Right.
I know.
Totally
get it.
Where's Dan Quayle when you need him? Right.
All right, back in 20 seconds. How about those Brewers beating up on the Cubs last night, 9-3, including a grand slam by Andrew Vaughn, who's only been in the big leagues for 3 weeks since the Brewers called him up. He now has 21 RBIs. The only hitter with more is the Phillies superstar Kyle Schwarber. Vaughn had 6 runs batted in last night, 4 of them with one swing of the bat, a grand slam that sealed the deal for the Brewers to beat the Cubs 9-3. Brewers are sitting on the best record in baseball. They've won 15 out of their last 18 games, including that 11-game winning streak. They're now 2 games up on the Cubs on top of the National League Central Division, and they are going to be going for the sweep this afternoon at American Family Field. Pre-game coverage begins at 12:35 on civic media stations in Oshkosh, Racine, Kenosha, Park Falls, Hayward, Richland Center, and can't wait to talk about it tomorrow morning, hopefully with some good news to pass along. Story that I didn't have time to cover with Earl here is coming out of the legislature, and that is the notion of setting up a task force to study why Black women and girls face a disproportionate likelihood of being murdered. You might recall that in past legislative sessions, Representative Sheila Stubbs of Madison has introduced a bill to create a missing and murdered African-American women and girls task force within the Wisconsin Department of Justice. Now, the Department of Justice already has as well a task force on missing and murdered Indigenous women. But that was created by State Attorney General Josh Kaul. And at the time, there was federal money available for that from the Federal Violence Against Women Act. Because there is no such federal funding for doing this for Black women, it would, Josh Kaul says, be better to have this created by an act of the legislature. But in the last session, despite bipartisan approval of creating such a task force, the bill didn't pass. It was referred in the state Senate to a committee that was chaired by now former state Senator Dewey Strobel of Cedarburg. And he said the bill was well-intentioned, but in his words, I believe every person who is missing or murdered deserves equal justice under the law. I have a difficult time legislating in a way that allows government to prioritize justice based on a victim's race or gender. Perhaps the whitest thing that a white man could say in the Wisconsin legislature last year. Because it's not a problem for his community. It is the people who answer Black Lives Matter with, well, all lives matter, without looking at the disproportionate amount of violence done to Blacks through police violence and through actions that go beyond the scope of their training. Similarly, you have a disproportionate number of African American women and girls who go missing or who end up being murdered. And a task force would look at the reasons behind that violence and make recommendations to reduce that violence. It would appropriate $80,000 for one full-time Department of Justice staff member who would oversee the initiative. And if anything that they would work out in terms of recommendations could in any way lead to the saving of lives, how is that a bad thing? So this time around, Representative Stubbs is going to try it again, and perhaps with Dewey Strobel no longer in the Wisconsin State Senate, this bipartisan bill may have a chance of passing this time around. Jim Santel is a former U.S. attorney. He's going to join Melissa Baldoff in our next segment to talk about climate matters, but he's here now for a couple of minutes early just to talk about something else out of Washington, D.C. here. Jim, good morning. How are you?
Pat, good morning. Delighted to be with you as always.
The question I have for you here is the latest person affiliated with Donald Trump who now has a lifetime appointment as a federal judge, despite whistleblowers and warning bells all about this person, Emil Bovee or Bovee, I'm not really sure. But again, a Trump loyalist now with a lifetime federal appeals court judgeship. This did not come out of the blue. There were people that warned that this is a guy who, correct me if I'm wrong, has been part of the purge of career prosecutors in the U.S. Department of Justice.
Absolutely. And we may recall that we first, well, not all of us, but many of us first witnessed him sitting next to Donald Trump. He was one of Donald Trump's two principal attorneys in that Manhattan courtroom when he was charged with those 34 felonies for which he was convicted. He was the former personal attorney, along with Todd Blanche, who's our deputy attorney general now, personal attorneys, attorney-client relationship with then private citizen Donald Trump, now president. He comes into the administration early on. He is inside the office of the Deputy Attorney General. Again, his boss, his colleague from back in Manhattan courtroom days. And he is the one who very early on is the principal architect and person who terminates many of the employees along the way under his tutelage, so to speak, under his supervision, terminating the employment of assistant United States attorneys who were responsible for the January 6th prosecution. More recently, also terminating the employees who worked with Jack Smith on those two cases involving Donald Trump, the Mar-a-Lago matter, the January 6th matter. And he has also been an architect of many other things inside the Department of Justice that changed dramatically the relationship, number one, between the White House and the department, and also, Pat, all your listeners and the government, because he has got a whole new set of principles contrary to the mores and principles of Department of Justices for years and years. As you indicated, he is now going to be sworn in as an appeals court judge, the Third Circuit. That's basically Pennsylvania, New Jersey, a few other states out there, Virgin Islands as well. And a lifetime tenure on the federal appeals court, one court below the United States Supreme Court.
And it does, again, it gets in the way of the traditional independence of the Justice Department and does, again, show the potential for politicization of court orders to advance what an incumbent president wants to do, not necessarily what the Constitution says. Jim Santel will be back with us with Melissa Baldoff, and we will have this week's Climate Check coming up next on the Civic Media Radio Network. And how is Melissa today?
Good. How about you?
Very good. Very good. Where were you kids the other day that I saw such nice social media pics? We were at some kind of a celebration or something.
We're at a wedding.
You're at a wedding.
Jones.
That was nice.
Yeah.
It was, for all the talk of social media has this detrimental effect because people see other people leading these glamorous lives and they go, my life isn't glamorous. I never quite got that. To me, it's like, no, these are pictures of happy. I like seeing pictures of happy because
I know.
I have to talk to you all the time about politics is this and bitter and negative and all that. And it's like, look, there's Melissa having fun. There's Joe having fun. Thank God somebody's out there having fun. It's refreshing.
Yes. We had a wedding and then we were at German Fest also over the weekend.
Nice. Oh, German Fest.
Better than that.
That's right. And then Joe makes, what is he, serving up brats? Or I forget what he was doing for German Fest.
Yeah, so he is on the grill,
Yes.
and then I was inside the booth helping to serve them.
Nice. Okay. Well, good.
Mhm.
All right. Well, so we've got no shortage of court cases here, and then Melissa will see what do we got here. Oh,
Melissa, I'm Jim. I don't know if we met before. Jim
I'm
Santel.
sorry,
Good-
you too.
Hi.
Jim,
Good,
Melissa.
good,
Yeah.
good to be with you this morning. And
You as well.
Great little crossover episode that I'm looking
right,
forward
exactly,
to.
right. It's like NBC on Thursday nights. It's
That's
exactly the same thing.
You never know. It's like
right.
Chicago Fire and Chicago Med, all in one here. So, all right, we will get going in 3 minutes. I'll see you guys soon.
Very good.
All right.
Quick reminder here that Up North News is a separate entity from our friends at Civic Media. Up North News is part of Courier, a pro-democracy newsroom with outlets in several states, including Wisconsin. Also affiliated with several newsletters, podcasts, video series. Let me tell you about a couple of them really quick. You know, our friend Mark Jacob is here on Friday mornings. He has a newsletter called Stop the Presses, all about how right-wing extremism has exploited the weaknesses in American journalism and what we can do about it. This week's issue is entitled Why the Washington Post is Dead to Me and Why I Haven't Canceled the New York Times Despite Its Flaws. And then there's Control Alt-Right Delete by Melissa Ryan, a weekly newsletter that is also devoted to covering the rise of far-right extremism, white nationalism, disinformation, and online toxicity. And her newsletter this week is titled Swapping Satire for Substack. Stephen Colbert is out, and legacy media continues to erode. So get those and all the other products put forth by Courier over at couriernewsroom.com. So we mentioned Mark Jacobs normally here on Fridays. So is Jim Santel, a former U.S. attorney, but he's with us right now, along with Melissa Baldoff for this week's Climate Check. Melissa, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good. It's nice to introduce you to Jim here because we've been talking a lot about how since the Trump administration took office, we don't get to talk anymore about initiatives coming out of Washington, D.C., coming out of Congress. And so instead, the battle for a better climate has moved to the courtrooms, and Jim's going to fill us in on cases across the U.S. and, frankly, across the world. But, Melissa, let's start with you just to illustrate that, look, even when there's a hostile entity like a president or a Congress, there are still different ways to do work. We've said at the local level, for example, courts are another option. There's always an opportunity to try to do better and try to have a better, I guess, planet, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, there absolutely is. There are always opportunities. You just look to, the local and state governments that we see doing work. You look at, neighborhoods and communities who are committed and who haven't given up and are continuing the fight and are not letting, what's happening at the federal level stop them from continuing to move forward, because what we can't afford to do is put our progress on hold for 4 years because we don't have partners in DC anymore. We know that's not what the rest of the world is doing. They're going to be leaving us behind. We're going to be outliers here again by not taking the climate crisis seriously and by refusing to acknowledge it. And by, in fact, the Trump administration yesterday, moving to, repeal the, scientific declaration that acknowledges that humans are driving climate change. They don't want to acknowledge anymore the just basic science. So we are having to look to others to see that progress because we're not seeing it from the federal government.
Which really makes it an issue, Jim, of justice. And so we can talk about the U.S. cases in a sec, but you were the one that alerted me that even the World Court is involved in the climate crisis to a degree. Tell us what they have been doing and talking about there.
Yes, this is the International Court of Justice. We sometimes call it the World Court. It's at The Hague. And just last week, a 15-member panel of the court, a unanimous court, basically said an awful lot of things in the legal sense that Melissa just commented about. They find that the failure of nations, yes, that includes us, but failure of nations across the globe to take action to protect our climate system generally may constitute, as they said, an internationally wrongful act. That's an awful close to coming to describing that kind of conduct as criminal. Also finds the protection of the environment is a precondition for, get this, ensuring human rights, and cited the support by governments of fossil fuel production as a potential violation of human rights. And again, this is the first time that the World Court, this is a part of the United Nations, has spoken out about this. It is a big deal, and it plainly sends a message that legitimate judicial people looking at this, they just roll out of bed some morning. They conducted hearings, they had what we would call trials, and they come up with this conclusion, not only about the obligation, but if you don't do this, what you're doing not only to the planet, which is number one, of course, derivatively us, and also to human rights, which is a fascinating way of looking at that. As Melissa just said, then we've got juxtaposed to that, our Environmental Protection Agency here in this country going in just the opposite direction, rescinding this 2009 notion, endangerment finding. It's the basis upon which all of our attempts and our undertakings to address greenhouse gases have proceeded. It's basically that way of ensuring that tailpipe emissions are somewhat reduced. That the EPA is rescinding, and for that reason, the rules that would encourage electric cars and encourage a diminution of our air pollution, that we're abandoning here in America. Completely different approaches, one plainly completely wrong, one sending us some inspiration and some motivation to do something about this horrific problem.
And Melissa, when we talk about this from a human rights and a legal standpoint of other nations being wronged, there are different ways to come at this. It's not just that, in some other nations, smaller nations, that now their air is dirtier. But frankly, I can say this from my short time living in the Cayman Islands and in other countries, they did not do anything to exacerbate the fact that sea levels are rising and endangering, their very way of life. And it's no longer like some incidental thing like, oh, we didn't understand that our smokestacks were going to cause problems for your countries. They now know the science is there. So I feel like there's, for laymen like you and me, there is a strong underpinning for a case to be made in court about, getting countries to be more responsible with their emissions, with their output, with their conduct overall.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't a situation, like you said, where we're not aware. The U.S. is one of the, we're one of the biggest polluters in the world, and we are very aware of what we're doing. The science is there. Everyone, for the most part, maybe, I guess not everyone, but, most people are acknowledging that this is what is causing the emissions are what's causing climate change and causing these adverse, health impacts that are leading to adverse economic impacts. We're aware of it, right? There's no argument that anyone is presenting. There's no serious fact-based, evidence-based arguments to the contrary to say that humans aren't driving climate change with our actions and what we're doing. There's no other fact-based, evidence-based argument here that anyone is presenting. So it is incredibly, I think, very selfish and irresponsible that we aren't taking any steps to mitigate this, not only for what we're doing to people in this country, but what we're doing to the rest of the world. We have a responsibility to everybody. It's kind of, to me, it's like what we know about, smoking cigarettes now, right? Like, it's not just harming you, it's harming everybody else. If you're, smoking cigarettes, like in a car with kids, right? Like, that's not just harming the person that's smoking the cigarettes. You are exposing the kids in that car to all that secondhand smoke, which is going to be dangerous to them too. So, I think we have to be really mindful of what our actions are in this country and how they are impacting the rest of the world, because we're not isolated here. What we do is impacting everybody else.
And Pat, if I could follow up on Melissa's comment about harm, it is stunning to hear that this administration is withdrawing what Melissa and I have talked about. You've also commented about this rescission of the endangerment finding. You know where they're justifying this? They're saying that the present climate regulations that Melissa's talking about actually pose real harm to human health. Why? Because it will lead to higher prices and reduced consumer choices. That's the basis upon which they're rescinding these regulations. It's a stunning turning up on its head of the whole notion of harm beyond our borders and to other people.
Oh, it's Alice in Wonderland type stuff here, Jim. So let's move from the world court to more traditional courts here in the States. But I noticed that there was a similar case in Italy, but there are cases in New York and in Hawaii. And they're in court because you have essentially a group of plaintiffs saying that these companies and or these governments, again, know that there are dangers, and yet they're creating hazards anyway. Congress won't do anything about it, so we want this court to do something about it. Is that kind of capturing what's happening in these state lawsuits?
That's capturing it perfectly. And thankfully, our environmental laws in this country do give private parties, entities, individuals, groups of people what's called a private right of action to bring these lawsuits. All they need to show, of course, we've talked a lot about this, Pat, is standing, which means, have I been endangered? Have I been damaged in some way? And they plainly, in all those lawsuits you mentioned, say, yes, indeed, by virtue of what, and you fill in the blank, whoever the defendants are, the producers of the environmental harm, they are causing me harm. That's standing. And now I am asking this judicial branch of our nation, different states, to come in and direct these defendants to do all kinds of remedial things. That's what the EPA standards have always traditionally been about. That's the basis upon which the Congress has, in prior years, passed legislation, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, all those kinds of things. That's the basis upon which these are proceeding. We know as well that just in the last term, the previous term to this one, the Supreme Court basically smacked down the Biden administration when it came to its good neighbors policy. Again, following up on Melissa's point, this notion that there are portions of our nation, typically us, the Midwest, that produce these horrific gases in our airs. They drift across the country, prevailing westerlies, and affect other parts. Supreme Court said last term, that's too much, that's too big, that's too novel. President can't do that, only Congress can do it. Well, if that's the case, then Congress is not acting. Private individuals have got to get into the fray here, as they have been doing, and attack this problem.
So, final question, and I'll have to throw it back at you, Jim, and because I'm sure Melissa's wondering this too. I mean, we saw this happen with big tobacco, that eventually it was courts that said you are liable and you need to fix this somehow. Is that something we could eventually be seeing with, fossil fuel companies and or governments?
Yes, absolutely. And especially if we get what's called discovery and we find out in these civil cases, not criminal cases, civil cases, we get the emails back and forth, those memorandums that we've seen in those other cases that say, hey, we know we're doing this. But again, money is our big factor. We've got to supply revenues to our shareholders. That kind of motivation, that prompts courts. Again, I'd like to believe even in America of the 2025 and beyond, to do things to enjoin, to stop those companies from doing what they're doing, subject to appeal, subject to review. But that's the way that these matters are being handled, again, especially since right now, as you said, our own administration not taking these important issues on.
Melissa, I'm always glad to talk to you about climate issues, but I'm kind of glad you and I decided to check in with an actual attorney on this one. I feel smarter for it. We can talk about these things all day long, but somebody's actually got legal underpinnings for a segment like this. Jim, thank you very much for joining us. I'll talk to you on Friday. And Melissa, thank you. We'll talk next week.
Great. Thanks.
All right. A local update is coming up next for some of you. And if that's the case, I'll see you tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. for the rest of you. Some final news and notes from around Lake Wissota, including Civic Media's James Kelly. After this, you're up north. There we be.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Parker. Good. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
All right. Well,
Thanks, Jim. Take care.
All right. See you.
Take care.
Hey, look, there's James. I remembered.
Good morning.
How are you?
Yeah, back with the little people out here in Northwest Wisconsin.
Yeah, the little people. I know. It's finally found some time for you. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Did I put your notes in? Yes, I did. Let's see. Let's go. Just looking at your list here. Let's just move Altoona down to the bottom. Let's do let's do West Nile is the newest thing. Let's do West Nile, Barron County, then Barron County, and then Dunn County, and then Altoona.
Cool.
All right. Do that. All right. Good. We're all set. All right. I'll see you in a bit. We have a busy show planned for you tomorrow as well here on these mornings powered by Up North News on the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll talk to the executive director of the group More Perfect Union, running a billboard campaign calling attention to billionaire tax cuts, because there are still plenty of folks out there that are hearing all about these cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and other programs and thinking, good, that'll benefit me. No, it won't. Not even a little bit. A lot of folks don't know just how much of this is going to go toward tax cuts for billionaires. So we'll talk to somebody from More Perfect Union about that. Also, Sharita Booker, Chad Holmes, Sean O'Malley talking about your money in the markets, Joe Zapecki, all that coming up tomorrow. But right now, let's check in with James Kelly in our Civic Media newsroom in Chippewa Falls for some of the stories that he is following. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Pat. Speaking of those billboards, I believe the first one's going up in Eau Claire next week.
Oh, well, there you go. So keep an eye out for that in the Chippewa Valley. Let's look at some other Western Wisconsin headlines, and the first couple of them actually come from Barron County, where we already have West Nile virus rearing its head once again. Its tiny, tiny head through the mosquitoes that are infecting humans.
Yeah, the first human case in the state this year. Usually there's around 18 to 20 in a given year in Wisconsin, and they start to crop up around this time of year when it's warm and mosquitoes get more active. Luckily, it cannot spread from human to human, only mosquito to human. So if you limit your time outdoors, long sleeves, long pants, insect repellent, you should probably be okay.
Well, I mean, but again, West Nile is nothing to sneeze at here. So while it's not one of those human-to-human things, it's still not something you would want, kind of like Lyme's disease, as well from the ticks. And so, like you said, proper safeguards are definitely called for here. Also in Barron County is where we had that recent bear attack and the effort to track down the culprit, as it were.
Yeah, it's been about 2 weeks since the attack occurred. The woman who was attacked is out of the hospital. They say she's recovering well, so that is good news up in Comstock. It's been 2 weeks. They've captured 6 bears. None of the bears were the one that was involved in the attack, and they haven't seen any sign of it near the property. So they've decided to end their trapping efforts, and they'll continue to monitor the area and see if it turns up. But for now, it looks like this bear probably has retreated into the wilderness.
Or is no more. If memory serves, an officer that showed up took a shot at the bear when it was up in the tree and I guess winged it, but the bear was able to get down and get away. But for all we know, all we know is it hasn't been seen lately, and hopefully won't be again.
Nor has the cub since that incident.
Yeah, so we'll continue to follow and hope that there aren't any other headlines out of that neck of the woods because of that bear attack. Let's go down to Dunn County now, which you say here is seeking a designation as a hub zone. A hub zone of what?
Yeah, so this is a push by Governor Tony Evers and the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation in a few counties to either have them redesignated, like Sawyer County would be redesignated as a hub zone under these formal petitions, and Dunn County would get designated as one for the first time. These designations allow these areas to compete for federal contracts that are set aside. So it's kind of a jobs growth, new projects that maybe you wouldn't be able to fund otherwise. Another place where they're trying to get a hub zone designation is up in Douglas County to prepare for the Blatnick Bridge reconstruction project, expecting some economic turmoil in the meantime while that major transportation corridor is shut down. So it's just one of those ways where you can maybe get a little bit more investment in an area that typically has not been fully taken advantage of.
And that seems to have been a theme here today, as we've talked about Beaver Dam, as we talked about Chippewa Falls with Chad Trowbridge in the last hour from the school district about the economic health of communities and, the need to be proactive. You can't just sit there and wait for the next business, the next big employer to come along. You have to be a little bit more aggressive and not just the private sector, but government officials as well, where possible. And that's where this hub zone designation might come into play. We've talked before about what's happening in Altoona, the new attraction there, and a new little place for civic gathering, shall we say. Let's talk about the Yard in Altoona and what it is.
Yeah, they had their grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony over the weekend. It was a great event. A little hot for my liking, but I don't do well in the heat generally. I did find some nice shade to avoid getting sunburnt, though. It's been a long time coming, this project. City officials say it's been 3 years. There were a lot of issues with, how do you make shipping containers ADA compliant? That's kind of a difficult thing to figure out. But it's open now, and they're hoping it's going to both revitalize the downtown area and kind of provide maybe a soft launching point for businesses, restaurants, kind of little shops. Say, build your customer base up here. There's low overhead. It's a small space. And, if you end up being pretty popular in the community, maybe you can expand your business into a more permanent location, and we can use this shipping container for another new business.
Look, there's no guarantee, but it only takes one thing that takes a chance in an area that can spur other development. You've seen it not far away from that site, the River Prairie development along the 53 bypass in Altoona and Eau Claire. In downtown Eau Claire itself, it was RCU, Royal Credit Union, putting a new headquarters building there many years ago, and that neighborhood that I never thought was going to be revitalized has been completely revitalized. And the same could be said for using, these containers for this new place in Altoona. That again, all it takes is one for somebody to say, you know what, I'm going to put my restaurant there. I'm going to put my coffee shop there. I'm going to put my, craft shop there, whatever the case may be. And next thing you know, you're taking off. But, no guarantee, but at least they're trying. And that's what every community needs to have.
Yeah, and it is aesthetically a really nice space. The containers are set up very well. There's a little live stage area. There's kind of this Overwatch that is another container that's up a flight of stairs, but it's air conditioned in there, which is great for people like me who don't do well in the heat at all. And you can kind of look out over the whole area. There's green space. It's honestly, it turned out very well.
We've established again that we need to start a GoFundMe for air conditioning for James Kelly. He does not like this heat. We're going to try to take care of him a little bit further throughout the rest of the summer. James, keep cool. Thanks for checking in. Have a great day out there.
Thanks, Pat.
All right. And my thanks to today's guests. Boy, we had a lot of them. Melissa Kay. More importantly, Lilu. Parker Lilu came to life right here on our show. Chad Trowbridge, Melissa Baldoff, Jim Santel, Earl Ingram, Jimmy Koska, James Kelly, Brittany Merlot, and you for being a part of the show. I'm Pat Kreitlow. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow morning here up north. Lilu. I mean, if you all missed it earlier, if you're still watching the live stream, wait till this live stream ends. Go back and run it up to the 55-minute mark,
give or take. Yeah,
Lilu making an appearance. This is
on the move
is huge. All right, let's see. The executive of More Perfect Union. Let's see. No. Tomorrow is Thursday.
Yes.
On Thursday, the executive director of More Perfect Union talks about their billboard campaign, calling attention to the billionaire tax cuts. Okay. Okay. Good. Let me know when you're ready.
Uno momento, por favor.
Okay.
All right. Give me 2, please.
Okay, here come 2. On Thursday, our guest from A More Perfect Union talks about their billboard campaign, calling attention to how those budget cuts are just going to help those poor billionaires. And one more. On Thursday, details of a new billboard campaign calling attention to how... On Thursday, details of a new billboard campaign calling attention to how all those budget cuts are just going to help those poor billionaires. How was that?
All right.
We have a tease, kids.
We have a tease.
All right, live
Tune in
streamers.
tomorrow to find out.